a flashing siren in the dead of night, a smirk on the face of an officer who thinks his badge is a license to terrorize. He pulled her over for driving a luxury car in the wrong neighborhood, threw her in handcuffs, and planted a bag of narcotics in her trunk just to teach her a lesson. He thought she was just another voiceless victim he could crush for his own amusement. He didn't know she was Emma Grace, his new precinct captain. And at dawn, his entire life is going to be dismantled. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the asphalt of Route 114 into a slick, black mirror. Emma Grace gripped the leather steering wheel of her 2024 Mercedes-Benz S-Class, the rhythmic thud of the windshield wipers the only sound in the quiet cabin. She was exhausted. It had been a grueling 72 hours of packing, moving, and finalizing her transfer from the bustling, high-stakes environment of the Chicago Police Department's Internal Affairs Division to the sleepy, yet notoriously corrupt, Oak Haven Police Department in District 9. She had been specifically headhunted by the mayor and the chief of police to clean house. Oak Haven had a reputation. It was a boys' club, a precinct bleeding money through civil rights lawsuits and running rampant with officers who believed they were above the law. Emma was driving into town a day early, dressed in a simple, unbranded grey hoodie, faded blue jeans and sneakers. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun. She looked nothing like the highly decorated, 20-year veteran of the force who had systematically dismantled 3 organized crime rings and put 6 dirty cops behind bars. Tonight, she just looked like a tired black woman driving a very expensive car through a predominantly white, affluent suburb. And to Officer Travis Holt, that was a crime in itself. Travis sat in his cruiser, tucked away behind a billboard near the county line, nursing a lukewarm coffee. He was a 12-year veteran of District 9, a man who had survived 3 separate brutality complaints, simply because the union reps and his old-school sergeants always made the paperwork disappear. Travis viewed Oak Haven as his personal kingdom. When the sleek black Mercedes cruised past him, doing exactly the speed limit, his eyes narrowed. He ran the plates. Out of state. Registered to a Grace. "Look at this," Travis muttered to his rookie partner, Ben Collins, who was nervously tapping his fingers on his knee. "Out-of-state plates. High-end tint. You think she bought that with honest money, Benny?" "She's doing 45 in a 45, Travis," Ben said hesitantly. "Maybe we just let it go." "We don't let anything go in my town," Travis sneered, throwing the cruiser into drive and flipping on the lights and sirens. "Let's see what kind of attitude she's got." Inside the Mercedes, Emma saw the red and blue lights pierce the darkness in her rearview mirror. She sighed, a deep, weary sound. She checked her speedometer. She was perfect. She checked her blinkers as she safely pulled onto the muddy shoulder of the road, putting the car in park and turning on the interior dome light. As a cop, she knew exactly what to do. Hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Visible. No sudden movements. In her rearview mirror, she watched the officer approach. Travis Holt walked with a swagger, his hand resting casually on the butt of his service weapon. The rain battered his uniform, but he didn't seem to care. He stopped at her window and tapped hard on the glass with his heavy metal flashlight. Emma rolled down the window. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Travis shone the blinding beam of the flashlight directly into her eyes, ignoring the fact that the dome light was already on. He leaned in, his breath smelling of stale tobacco and cheap peppermint. "License, registration, and proof of insurance." "Now," Emma blinked against the harsh light, but kept her voice even, completely devoid of the fear Travis was used to eliciting. "My license is in my wallet, which is in my purse on the passenger seat. My registration is in the glove compartment. Which would you like me to reach for first?" Travis scoffed, annoyed by her calm demeanor. People like her were supposed to be shaking. They were supposed to be stammering. "Just get the license. Slowly. Don't try anything stupid." Emma slowly reached over, grabbed her wallet, and handed over her Illinois driver's license. Travis snatched it from her hand. He looked at the ID, then back at her. "Emma Grace. Long way from Chicago, Emma. What are you doing in Oak Haven?" "I'm moving here," Emma said politely. "I start a new job on Monday." "Right, a new job," Travis mocked, shining the light around the pristine leather interior of the car. "Must be a hell of a job to afford a $150,000 car. What do you do, Emma? You a rapper? You sling something on the side?" Ben, the rookie, shifted uncomfortably behind Travis. "Travis, come on." "Shut up, Benny," Travis snapped, before turning his aggressive gaze back to Emma. "Step out of the vehicle." Emma's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. "Officer, you haven't told me why you pulled me over. I was obeying the speed limit. My tags are up to date, and my tail lights are fully functional." "I pulled you over because you swerved over the yellow line," Travis lied smoothly, a practiced line he had used 100 times before. "And now I'm asking you to step out of the car because I smell marijuana." Emma stared at him. She didn't smoke. She had never touched a drug in her life. The car was brand new, smelling only of fresh leather and the lavender air freshener hanging from the vent. This was it. This was the exact cancer she had been brought in to cut out. "Officer," Emma said, her voice dropping an octave, carrying the authoritative timbre she usually reserved for briefing rooms. "There is no marijuana in this car. I have not swerved. I strongly suggest you run my license, write a citation if you feel you must, and let me go on my way." Travis's face flushed red with anger. "Are you telling me how to do my job? Get out of the damn car before I pull you out, drag you through the mud, and charge you with resisting arrest." Emma could have ended it right there. She could have reached into her center console, pulled out her gold captain's badge, and watched the color drain from this arrogant cop's face. She could have called Chief Henderson on her personal cell and had Travis suspended on the side of the road. But Emma Grace was a tactician. If she stopped him now, it would be a reprimand, a slap on the wrist. He would claim he made a mistake, the union would back him, and he would be back on the streets harassing citizens in a week. No. She needed to see exactly how deep the rot went. She needed him to commit a felony. Wordlessly, Emma unbuckled her seatbelt, pushed the door open, and stepped out into the freezing rain. "Hands on the hood!" Travis barked. She complied. Travis kicked her legs apart roughly and patted her down, far more aggressively than protocol demanded. Finding nothing, he smirked. "Watch her, Benny. I'm going to search the vehicle." "Travis, we don't have probable cause," Ben whispered frantically. "She's clean. Let's just run the name and let her go." "I said I smelled weed. That's probable cause," Travis hissed back. Emma watched silently in the rain as Travis tore through her car. He ripped things out of the glove box, tossed her expensive makeup bag onto the floorboards, and pulled the back seats down. He was frustrated. He wasn't finding anything. Finally, he popped the trunk. He leaned in, obscuring her view with his broad shoulders. Emma saw his right hand dip down toward his utility belt, into a small tactical pouch that was strictly not standard issue. A second later, Travis pulled back, holding up a small, clear plastic baggie, filled with a white, powdery substance. "Well, well, well," Travis announced loudly, his voice carrying over the rain. "Look what we have here. Looks like about 2 ounces of cocaine hidden in the spare tire compartment." Ben's eyes widened in shock. Emma's face remained a mask of stone. "Turn around. Put your hands behind your back," Travis ordered, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. As the cold steel clicked tightly around her wrists, biting into her skin, Emma looked Travis dead in the eye. "You put that in there?" You and I both know that car was clean. Travis leaned in close, smiling a cruel, yellow-toothed smile. It's your word against a decorated officer of the law, sweetheart. Who do you think the judge is going to believe? Welcome to Oakhaven. The ride to the District 9 precinct was a masterclass in psychological abuse. Travis Holt drove with reckless speed, taking sharp turns deliberately to send Emma sliding across the hard plastic of the cruiser's back seat. Her hands were cuffed uncomfortably tight behind her back, her shoulders aching with every jolt. Up front, Travis was having the time of his life. He keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4, bringing in a female suspect. Possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute. Looks like we took a major player off the board tonight." "Copy that, Unit 4. The dispatcher's voice crackled back, bored and mechanical. Ben Collins sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window into the rain, his jaw tight. "What's the matter, Benny?" Travis taunted. "You look like you're going to puke. This is real police work. This is how we keep the neighborhood safe from the trash trying to move in." Emma memorized every word. She memorized the route he took, noting that he deliberately bypassed the standard booking entrance, instead pulling into a secluded alleyway behind the precinct used for trash collection. This wasn't standard operating procedure. This was a man who operated entirely in the shadows. Travis dragged her out of the car by her upper arm. "Move it!" he grunted, pushing her toward the heavy steel door. They stepped into the harsh, flickering fluorescent lights of the District 9 precinct. The air smelled of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and sweat. It was 2 a.m., but the night shift was active. Several officers were lounging around desks, laughing at a video on a computer screen. When Travis walked in with a soaking wet, handcuffed Emma, a few of them looked up. "Look what the cat dragged in," called out Officer Ray Mitchell, a burly man with a thick mustache. "Good catch, Holt. What did she do?" "Caught her riding dirty on Route 114, Travis boasted loudly, parading Emma toward the booking desk. "Brand new Benz, 2 ounces of snow in the trunk." Thought she was smart. "Never smart enough for the Oakhaven PD," Desk Sergeant Greg Harrison chuckled from behind the high counter. Harrison was a veteran, a man with a bloated face and eyes that had seen decades of corruption and actively chose to ignore it. He didn't even look at Emma as a human being. He looked at her like paperwork. "Name?" Harrison asked, his fingers hovering over his keyboard. "Emma Grace," she replied quietly. "Speak up," Harrison barked. "Emma Grace." "Address?" "I don't have a permanent address in Oakhaven yet. I'm staying at the Marriott downtown." Travis scoffed, probably dealing out of the hotel. "Put her down as a flight risk, Greg." "Already on it," Harrison said, typing lazily. "Empty your pockets. Take off the shoelaces. You know the drill." Emma was uncuffed just long enough to surrender her personal items. She placed her phone, her keys, and her wallet on the counter. Travis snatched the wallet. "Let's see how much cash you're carrying," Travis said, pulling out her bills. $300, probably drug money. "We're seizing this under civil asset forfeiture." Emma's eyes narrowed. "That is my personal money. Furthermore, I have a right to a phone call." "You'll get a call when we feel like giving you a call," Harrison said without looking up. "Holt, take her back to cell 3. It's the cold one. Let her chill out for a few hours. I'll process this evidence." Travis grabbed her arm again, resecuring the handcuffs. As he led her down the narrow, sterile corridor toward the holding cells, Emma took careful note of the environment. The security cameras in the hallway? The red lights were off, unplugged or broken. The protocol sheet on the wall? 5 years out of date. The officers? Lazy, complicit, and completely devoid of accountability. She had spent a decade in internal affairs fighting exactly this kind of institutionalized rot. But seeing it up close, feeling the sting of the handcuffs and the sheer, arrogant racism of Travis Holt, it fueled a fire in her chest that burned hotter than she had ever felt. Travis shoved her into cell 3. It was a miserable, concrete box. The toilet in the corner was rusted, and the single steel bench was freezing. He slammed the heavy iron door shut, the metal clanging loudly in the quiet block. "Make yourself comfortable, Emma," Travis sneered through the bars. "You're going to be here for a long, long time. Mandatory minimums are a bitch." "Officer Holt," Emma said, stepping up to the bars, her voice dead calm. Travis paused. Something about her tone unnerved him. It wasn't the voice of a broken, frightened woman. It sounded like an order. "You've made a lot of mistakes tonight," Emma said softly. "But your biggest mistake was assuming you know who I am based on how I look." Travis laughed, a loud, nervous sound. "I know exactly what you are. See you at arraignment, criminal." He walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Emma retreated to the cold steel bench. She sat down, shivering in her damp clothes. She had no phone. She had no way to contact Chief Henderson to let him know she wouldn't be meeting him for breakfast. But she also knew something Travis Holt didn't. Chief David Henderson was a stickler for punctuality. He was expecting his new captain at 7 a.m. sharp at a diner 2 miles from the precinct. When she didn't show up, he would check her GPS tracker, a standard security measure on all high-ranking officers' personal vehicles during interstate transfers. He would find her car impounded at District 9, and he would come looking for her. She closed her eyes, ignoring the cold, and mentally drafted the termination papers for Officer Travis Holt, Sergeant Greg Harrison, and half the night shift. The trap was set. All she had to do was wait for the sun to rise. At 7:30 a.m., the atmosphere in the District 9 precinct underwent a massive shift. The lazy, casual energy of the night shift vanished, replaced by a frantic, nervous buzzing. The day shift officers were arriving, hastily buttoning collars and polishing badges. Janitors were furiously mopping the floors. Today was not a normal Thursday. Today was the day the new precinct captain was scheduled to take command. Rumors had been flying for weeks. The new captain was coming from out of state, an internal affairs heavy hitter, a ruthless disciplinarian who had a zero-tolerance policy for corruption. The mayor had given the new captain total autonomy to fire, suspend, and rebuild the precinct from the ground up. Panic was high. Travis Holt, running on a combination of bad coffee and adrenaline, stood by the front desk, looking entirely too pleased with himself. His shift had technically ended at 6 a.m., but he stuck around. He wanted to be front and center when the new captain arrived. He wanted to look like the hardest-working cop in the building. "Make sure my arrest report is on top of the pile, Greg," Travis told Sergeant Harrison, pointing to the paperwork. 2 ounces of coke, a major bust. The new boss is going to want to see proactive policing. I'm going to show him we get results here." I got it, Harrison muttered, stamping the file. "Just make sure your uniform is straight, Holt. I hear this new guy is a real hard-ass." In the back, in cell 3, Emma Grace stood up and stretched her stiff muscles. The thin sliver of light coming through the barred window told her it was morning. She heard the change in the building's rhythm, the slamming doors, the raised voices, the frantic footsteps. The orchestra was tuning up. The conductor was about to arrive. At precisely 8 a.m., the front double doors of the precinct swung open with explosive force. The room went dead silent. Chief of Police David Henderson marched into the room. He was a towering, broad-shouldered man in a meticulously tailored navy suit, his silver hair cropped military short. He possessed a presence that demanded absolute submission. But this morning, his usually stern face was twisted into an expression of barely contained, apocalyptic rage. Behind him, were two unsmiling men in dark suits, internal affairs investigators from the central office. "Attention on deck!" Sergeant Harrison shouted, leaping to his feet so fast he knocked his rolling chair backward. Every officer in the bullpen snapped to attention. Chief Henderson did not greet them. He did not say good morning. He marched directly to the booking desk, his heavy footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silent room. He slammed his hand down on the counter, making Harrison flinch. "Where is she?" Henderson's voice was a low, terrifying growl. Harrison blinked, terrified. "Sir? Where is who?" "I'm going to ask you this one time, Sergeant," Henderson said, leaning over the counter, his eyes burning into Harrison's. "And if you lie to me, I will personally see to it that you lose your pension and spend the rest of your natural life in a state penitentiary. Where is the woman who owns the black Mercedes, currently sitting in your impound lot?" Travis Holt stepped forward, a proud, sickeningly eager smile on his face. He thought the chief was here about the drug bust. He thought this was his moment. "Chief Henderson, sir." Travis saluted. "Officer Travis Holt. I'm the one who made that collar. Excellent instincts, if I do say so myself. Pulled her over for a traffic violation, smelled narcotics, and found 2 ounces of cocaine in the trunk. She's in holding cell 3 right now. We're waiting for the ADA to—" Henderson slowly turned his head to look at Travis. The chief's eyes were utterly devoid of warmth. He looked at Travis not like a fellow officer, but like a disease. "You arrested her," Henderson stated flatly. "Yes, sir. Caught her red-handed." Travis beamed. "Give me the keys to the holding cells," Henderson ordered, not breaking eye contact with Travis. "Now!" Harrison frantically fumbled with the keys on his belt, handing the heavy ring to the chief with a shaking hand. "Chief with respect," Travis said, confused by the lack of praise. "She's a suspect in a felony narcotics case. Should you really—" "Shut your mouth, Officer Holt," Henderson barked, the sheer volume rattling the windows of the bullpen. "Do not speak. Do not move. If you so much as twitch, I will have these IA investigators put you in irons." Travis froze, his confident smile evaporating instantly. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. The entire bullpen watched in terrified silence as Chief Henderson walked past the desk and down the corridor towards the holding cells. The 2 IA men flanked him, while Travis and Harrison stood frozen at the desk. At cell 3, Henderson shoved the heavy key into the lock and turned it. The iron door swung open. Emma Grace stepped out. She was still wearing the damp grey hoodie and jeans, her hair slightly messy. But the way she held herself, shoulders back, chin high, eyes sharp as broken glass, was unmistakable. She looked exactly like the apex predator she was. "Captain Grace," Chief Henderson said softly, his voice full of profound apology. "I cannot express how sorry I am." "Save the apology, David," Emma said calmly, her voice echoing down the hallway. "It's not your fault. It's an institutional failure." Back at the desk, Travis Holt felt the oxygen leave the room. His vision blurred. He felt like the floor had just dropped out from under him. He looked at Ben Collins, who had just walked into the precinct and was staring at the scene in absolute horror. Captain Grace? The pieces violently snapped together in Travis's mind. Emma Grace, moving from Chicago, starting a new job on Monday. "Oh my God," Travis whispered, the blood draining completely from his face. His hands began to shake. Emma walked down the hallway, side by side with the chief of police. She didn't walk like a prisoner being released. She walked like a general inspecting the troops. She stepped into the main bullpen, her eyes scanning the terrified faces of the officers until they locked dead onto Travis Holt. Travis took a step back, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I didn't know." Emma stopped directly in front of him. She looked at his badge. Then she looked into his terrified, pale eyes. "You didn't know I was your commanding officer," Emma said, her voice carrying across the dead, silent room. "Because if you had known, you would have smiled, called me sir or ma'am, and let me pass. You only planted those drugs. You only threw me in that cell because you thought I was a nobody. You thought I was someone without power, someone you could break." She took a step closer. Travis physically shrank back. "But here is the reality, Officer Holt," Emma continued, her tone dropping to a lethal whisper. "I am the new captain of District 9, and I have spent the last 8 hours sitting in a freezing cell, mentally drafting the end of your entire existence." She turned to the chief. "Chief Henderson." "Yes, Captain. I want the security footage from his cruiser impounded immediately. I want his locker tossed. I want every single arrest report he has filed in the last 5 years audited by Internal Affairs. And I want him stripped of his badge and his weapon, right here, right now." "You can't do this!" Travis suddenly panicked, his voice cracking. The Union can't save you from a federal civil rights violation, kidnapping under the color of law, and evidence tampering." Emma cut him off, her voice like cracking a whip. "Take his badge, David. I'm going to take a shower, put on my uniform, and when I come back downstairs, we are going to burn this precinct's corruption to the ground." 2 hours later, the District 9 precinct was unrecognizable. The front doors had been locked to the public, a makeshift "closed for emergency maintenance" sign slapped on the glass. Inside, it was a war zone of paperwork, flashing hard drives, and terrified whispers. When Emma Grace descended the metal staircase from the locker rooms, the entire bullpen froze. The weary, soaking wet woman from Cell 3 was gone. In her place stood Captain Grace. She wore a perfectly tailored midnight blue uniform, the brass buttons polished to a mirror shine, the gold double bars of her rank resting heavily on her collar. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, immaculate twist. She walked with the lethal grace of a predator who had finally been let off the leash. Travis Holt was sitting in Interrogation Room A. He had been stripped of his badge, his gun, and his heavy utility belt. He sat in just his uniform shirt and trousers, his hands trembling as he stared at the two-way mirror. He knew Emma was on the other side. He could feel her. Inside the observation room, Emma stood with Chief Henderson and 2 Internal Affairs investigators, Special Agent Arthur Pendleton, a veteran from the State Prosecutor's Office, known for his ruthlessness, and Agent Davis. "The dashcam footage from Holt's cruiser is missing, Captain," Pendleton said, his voice flat. "Looks like someone manually wiped the hard drive in the trunk before their shift ended." "He thinks he's clever," Emma said, her eyes never leaving Travis through the glass. "He wiped the physical drive. He didn't read the memo from the mayor's office last month. All District 9 cruisers were upgraded with a secondary cloud backup system, specifically because of missing footage complaints." Henderson allowed a grim smile to touch his lips. "I'll have the tech team pull the cloud data." "Do that. But we don't even need it to bury him," Emma said, turning away from the glass. "I want the evidence room audited. Every single seizure from the last 6 months. 2 ounces of high-grade cocaine doesn't just fall out of the sky. He had to get it from somewhere. Which means there's a leak in the chain of custody." Emma pushed the heavy door to the interrogation room open and stepped inside. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Travis jumped slightly in his metal chair, his eyes darting to the door as it clicked shut behind her. Emma didn't sit down. She walked slowly around the metal table, her footsteps echoing sharply. "Captain," Travis started, his voice a desperate, dry croak. "Look, I overstepped. I admit that. It was a bad call. But you have to understand the pressure we're under out here, the things we see. We have to make snap judgments to protect the community. It was a mistake." "A mistake," Emma repeated, tasting the word. She stopped directly across from him, leaning her hands on the cold steel table. "A mistake is filing the wrong form. A mistake is forgetting to read Miranda. You didn't make a mistake, Holt. You hunted." "I was doing police work," Travis pleaded, trying to summon some of his old bravado, but it withered under her stare. "I profiled a vehicle that looked suspicious. You know how it is. The Brotherhood. Do not insult me by invoking the badge you just disgraced." Emma's voice cracked like a whip, making Travis flinch. "You profiled a black woman driving a car you decided she couldn't afford. You illegally searched my vehicle. When you couldn't find a crime, you manufactured one. You planted narcotics. You falsified a police report. You committed perjury the second you signed that arrest narrative." Travis swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. "The union will back me. Gary Mitchell is my rep. He won't let you railroad me." Emma pulled out her phone and set it on the table. She tapped the screen, bringing up a contact, and hit speakerphone. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Mitchell?" "Mr. Mitchell, this is Captain Emma Grace, the new commanding officer of District 9. There was a long pause on the other end. "Captain, word travels fast. I hear you've got one of my guys in the box. Officer Holt." "Gary," Travis yelled at the phone. "Gary, they're trying to set me up. They locked me in the box without a lawyer, man. You gotta get down here." "Mr. Mitchell," Emma said calmly, ignoring Travis, "I wanted to formally inform you that Officer Holt is currently under investigation for civil rights violations, kidnapping under the color of law, evidence tampering, and possession of a Schedule II narcotic. The victim in this case is me. The incident occurred prior to my official start time." Silence hung heavy on the line. Travis looked at the phone, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. "Gary, tell her you're filing a grievance. Tell her." "Captain Grace," Mitchell finally said, his voice completely devoid of emotion. "The police union is dedicated to defending officers who act within the scope of their duties and the confines of the law. Planting evidence on a superior officer does not fall within those parameters. The union will not be providing legal counsel for Officer Holt in this matter. He is entirely on his own." Click. The dial tone echoed in the small room. Travis stared at the phone, his jaw slacking. The color completely drained from his face. The invisible shield he had worn for 12 years, the shield that had let him terrorize innocent people, the shield of the Brotherhood, had just shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. "No," Travis whispered. "He can't do that. He can't." "You are a liability, Travis," Emma said coldly, picking up her phone. "And cowards always abandon a sinking ship. But your nightmare is just starting, because I'm not just going to fire you. I'm going to find out exactly where you got those drugs." She turned and walked out of the room, leaving Travis alone in the suffocating silence. The walls were rapidly closing in. Panic is a contagious disease, and by noon it had infected every dirty cop in District 9. Sergeant Greg Harrison was sweating profusely behind the booking desk. He was frantically trying to reconcile the physical ledger of the evidence lockup with the digital database before the IA investigators reached his station. His hands shook as he scribbled out numbers, his mind racing. Travis Holt had begged him for a favor 3 weeks ago. "Just a pinch, Greg. Just enough to use as a prop. I'll bring it right back." Harrison had skimmed 2 ounces off a massive cartel bust that had rolled through the county, altering the intake weight from 4.2 pounds to 4.0. It was supposed to be easy. Nobody ever checked. "Sergeant Harrison." Harrison jumped out of his skin, dropping his pen. Special Agent Pendleton stood on the other side of the high desk, holding a printed spreadsheet. Pendleton didn't look angry. He looked like a butcher examining a cut of meat. "We're doing a physical inventory of lockbox 4B, Pendleton said, his voice smooth and professional. "Case number 88-104. The Ramirez seizure. We need you to unlock it." Harrison's throat went dry. "Right now?" "Sir, I'm right in the middle of shift change paperwork." "Right now, Sergeant," Pendleton said, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Unless you've lost the key." 10 minutes later, Harrison was in handcuffs, sobbing openly in the hallway as IA agents tore through the evidence room. Meanwhile, Travis Holt had been temporarily released from the interrogation room to use the restroom, escorted by a silent IA agent who waited outside the door. Travis splashed freezing water on his face, staring at his haggard reflection in the dirty mirror. He was looking at 20 years in a federal penitentiary. His life was over, unless he could introduce reasonable doubt, unless he could get Ben to take the fall. He burst out of the bathroom and saw rookie Ben Collins standing nervously by the water cooler at the end of the hall. Travis marched over to him, his eyes wild, ignoring the IA agent who took a step forward. "Benny!" Travis hissed, grabbing the rookie by the collar and pinning him against the drywall. "Benny, you have to listen to me. We're partners. Partners cover each other. You're going to tell them that you smelled the weed. You're going to tell them that you saw her reaching for the trunk before I stopped her. If we stand united, it's 2 cops against 1 citizen. They can't prove a thing." Ben Collins looked at the man who had bullied, manipulated, and terrified him for the past 6 months. For the first time, Ben didn't look scared. He looked deeply, profoundly relieved. "Take your hands off him, Holt," a voice commanded. Travis turned to see Captain Grace standing at the end of the hall, her arms crossed behind her back. Travis slowly let go of Ben's collar. "Captain, I was just talking to my partner." "Right, Ben?" Ben stepped away from Travis, straightening his uniform. He walked deliberately past his former partner and stopped next to Emma. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black digital voice recorder. "What is that?" Travis whispered, his stomach plummeting to the floor. "I bought it 3 weeks ago," Ben said, his voice remarkably steady. "After you beat that kid behind the convenience store for mouthing off to you. I knew I couldn't go to Harrison. I knew I couldn't go to the chief, because the union would crush me before the ink dried on the report. So I just started recording. Every shift, every conversation in the cruiser." Travis felt his knees go weak. "I have the audio from last night, Travis," Ben continued, looking his former mentor dead in the eyes. "I have you explicitly stating we had no probable cause. I have you bragging about planting the cocaine, and I have you laughing about targeting her because of the car." "You rat," Travis breathed, his voice dripping with venom. "You little rat." "No," Emma corrected, placing a hand on Ben's shoulder. "He's a police officer. You're the rat, Travis, and you just gave me the final nail in your coffin." Emma held up a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside it was the very baggie of cocaine Travis had pulled from her trunk hours earlier. But there was a bright red evidence tag stapled to the top. "We just finished auditing the evidence room," Emma said, her voice echoing in the quiet hallway. "Agent Pendleton traced the chemical compound and the distinct stamp on the inner packaging. This cocaine wasn't just street-level trash. This belongs to evidence from the Ramirez cartel bust, a joint task force case between the DEA and the FBI." Travis couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, suffocating. "You didn't just plant evidence, Holt," Emma said, stepping forward until she was inches from his face. "You stole federal evidence from a multi-agency operation. The FBI has been contacted. You just crossed state lines into federal trafficking and evidence tampering. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is already drafting the indictments." Karma hadn't just knocked on Travis Holt's door. It had driven a battering ram through his entire life. "Put him back in the box," Emma ordered the IA agent. "And call the federal marshals. We're transferring him to federal holding. He doesn't get to stay in my precinct anymore." As Travis was dragged away, his legs finally giving out, he realized the terrifying truth. He hadn't just picked the wrong target. He had picked the one person capable of burning his corrupt kingdom to ash, and he had handed her the match. The arrival of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is not a quiet affair. At 2:15 p.m., 3 black SUVs with dark tinted windows pulled up to the curb of the District 9 precinct, blocking the street entirely. Dozens of agents wearing dark windbreakers with bold yellow lettering stormed the building. They weren't just here for Officer Travis Holt. They were here to execute a federal takeover of the precinct's evidence lockup. Captain Emma Grace stood on the second-floor balcony overlooking the bullpen, watching the systematic dismantling of the corrupt empire Travis had thrived in. Below her, the loud, arrogant officers who had laughed at her just hours before were now sitting at their desks in stunned silence, their weapons confiscated, waiting to be interviewed by the feds. Travis was brought out of his temporary holding cell by 2 massive U.S. marshals. He was no longer wearing his police uniform. They had stripped him of it, forcing him into a bright orange, standard-issue county jumpsuit. The irony was suffocating. His wrists were shackled in front of him, and a heavy chain was wrapped around his waist, locking his arms in place. As the marshals led him through the bullpen, Travis desperately looked around at the faces of his colleagues. He was looking for sympathy. He was looking for the brotherhood he had championed so loudly. He found nothing but averted eyes. Officer Ray Mitchell, who had joked about Emma's arrest, suddenly found his shoes fascinating. Even the veteran detectives who usually ran the floor refused to look in Travis's direction. He was radioactive. To acknowledge him was to invite the wrath of the feds and the terrifying new captain standing above them. "Keep moving, Holt," one of the marshals grunted, shoving him toward the double doors. They loaded him into an armored transport van. Travis sat on the cold metal bench, the engine rumbling beneath him. And finally, the reality of his situation crushed the last ounce of his defiance. He began to weep. The arrogant, swaggering predator who had terrorized Route 114 was gone, replaced by a terrified, broken man who finally understood the sheer magnitude of his actions. By 4 p.m., Travis was sitting in a windowless interview room at the FBI field office downtown. He hadn't been offered coffee. He hadn't been offered a phone call. Across the steel table sat Special Agent in Charge Thomas Kessler, a man with cold, calculating eyes, and Arthur Pendleton from Internal Affairs. "I want a deal," Travis blurted out, his voice hoarse from crying. "I know things. I know how the drugs get moved. I know who takes a cut. I can give you names, dates, ledger locations. Just keep me out of general population. You know what they do to cops in federal prison. Please." Agent Kessler slowly opened a thick manila folder and spread several glossy photographs across the table. They were surveillance photos. "You want to give us names, Travis?" Kessler asked dryly. "Let's see. You want to give us Detective Grace from Narcotics, who has been skimming cash from raids? We arrested him an hour ago. You want to give us Judge Richard Clayton, who signs off on your bogus warrants for a kickback. He just resigned and surrendered his passport." Travis stared at the photos, his breathing shallow. How? How do you already have all this?" The door to the interview room opened. Captain Emma Grace walked in, carrying a small, black digital recorder, the one Ben Collins had surrendered. "Because arrogance makes you sloppy, Travis," Emma said, pulling out a chair and sitting directly across from him. "You thought you were untouchable, so you talked. You talked in the cruiser. You bragged in the locker room. You laid out your entire criminal network to a rookie you thought you could bully into submission. Officer Collins gave us over 80 hours of audio recordings. You've been narrating your own federal indictment for 6 months. Travis felt the blood rush from his head. He had nothing. No leverage, no chips to bargain with. The U.S. attorney is not offering you a plea deal, Holt, Kessler stated, closing the folder. You crossed state lines with cartel narcotics. You attempted to frame a superior officer under the color of law. You are going to face a jury, and we are going to ask for the maximum sentence. And as for your fear of general population? Kessler smiled, a grim, humorless expression. The Bureau of Prisons doesn't offer protective custody for corrupt officers who steal from cartels. You're going exactly where you sent hundreds of innocent people. Captain, please, Travis begged, tears streaming down his face, leaning as far across the table as his chains would allow. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't know who you were. If I had known, that is exactly why you deserve no mercy, Emma interrupted, her voice a lethal whisper that silenced him instantly. You're only sorry because of the badge I wear. If I had been anyone else, a nurse, a teacher, a mother just trying to get home, you would have ruined my life and slept perfectly fine that night. You are a predator, Travis, and the hunt is officially over. Emma stood up, turning her back on him. Process him, Agent Kessler. I have a precinct to rebuild. As Emma walked out of the room, Travis Holt's agonized sobs echoed through the heavy steel door, the sound of a man mourning the end of his own life. The following Monday morning, the atmosphere at District 9 was unrecognizable. The toxic frat house culture had been completely eradicated. Over the weekend, 16 officers had been suspended without pay, pending federal investigation. 7, including Sergeant Harrison, had been formally terminated and indicted. Captain Emma Grace stood at the front of the briefing room at 7 a.m. sharp. The remaining officers sat rigidly in their chairs, their uniforms immaculate, their eyes fixed forward. There was no whispering. There was no joking. Look to your left. Look to your right. Emma's voice rang out, clear and authoritative. A lot of chairs are empty this morning. Those chairs belonged to men who believed a badge was a license to abuse, to steal, and to oppress. They are gone, and they are never coming back. She paced the length of the room, her eyes making contact with every single officer. Oak Haven Police Department is no longer a kingdom for bullies, Emma continued. From this moment forward, we are public servants. You will treat every citizen of this city, regardless of their race, their neighborhood, or the car they drive, with the utmost respect and dignity. If you violate a citizen's rights, I will not just fire you. I will personally ensure you are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. If anyone in this room has a problem with that standard, leave your badge on my desk and walk out that door right now. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Good, Emma said. She looked at the front row where Ben Collins sat, looking exhausted but resolute. Officer Collins, stand up. Ben swallowed hard and stood at attention. Officer Collins demonstrated what true policing looks like. Emma addressed the room. He saw corruption, and instead of joining it, instead of ignoring it, he risked his own safety to document it. He remembered the oath he took. Because of him, this precinct is finally clean. That is the standard. She nodded to him. Have a seat, Ben. The months that followed became a landmark case in the state's judicial history, echoing real-life Department of Justice crackdowns on systemic police corruption. The trial of Travis Holt was a media spectacle. The dashcam footage, recovered from the cloud backup, was played in open court. The jury watched in horror as Travis arrogantly planted the cocaine, and they listened to the audio recordings of him bragging about targeting a black woman because he didn't believe she deserved her success. When the verdict was read, there was no hesitation. Guilty on all counts. On the day of sentencing, Judge Amanda Vance, a no-nonsense federal judge with a reputation for punishing public corruption, stared down at Travis Holt. He stood in his orange jumpsuit, looking gaunt, pale, and thoroughly defeated. "Mr. Holt, you were entrusted with the power of the state to protect the vulnerable," Judge Vance read from her statement. "Instead, you weaponized that power to terrorize them. You allowed your prejudice to dictate the law. You are a disgrace to the uniform and a danger to society." The gavel slammed down. "I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Travis collapsed into his chair, sobbing into his shackled hands as his defense attorney awkwardly patted his shoulder. He was led out of the courtroom through a side door, disappearing into the dark, punishing system he had so eagerly used against others. Karma had not just knocked. It had collected its debt in full. A year later, Captain Emma Grace stood outside the District 9 precinct. The sun was shining, casting a warm glow over the newly painted building. The community that had once feared the police cruisers now waved as they drove by. Crime rates were down, but more importantly, citizen complaints regarding police brutality had plummeted to zero. Emma walked over to her pristine, black Mercedes, parked in the captain's spot. She ran a hand over the smooth leather of the steering wheel, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. She had come to Oakhaven to do a job. She had looked into the darkest, ugliest parts of the city's justice system, and she had dragged it into the light. She started the engine, the quiet purr of the luxury car sounding like victory. As she pulled out onto Route 114, heading home under a clear blue sky, she knew her city was finally safe. Not just from the criminals on the street, but from the ones who used to hide behind a badge. The terrifying reality of Travis Holt's abuse of power is a chilling reminder of what happens when corruption goes unchecked. But Captain Emma Grace's story proves that the truth will always come to light, and real justice spares no one, especially not those who hide behind a badge. This story mirrors the real-life courage of whistleblowers and internal affairs officers who risk everything to dismantle systemic corruption from the inside out. When karma comes for the corrupt, it hits with absolute force. If you enjoyed this story of justice and brutal karma, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life drama stories. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Emma's shoes?